Hugh Beaumont was in fact a TV star at the apex of TV's vast cultural influence. He played an iconic TV father on an iconic TV show. Not only did he play the central character of Ward Cleaver, a father trying to make his way through a changing culture and remain true to his principles and to compassion at the same time, Hugh Beaumont also directed and helped write a number of the Leave It to Beaver episodes. And before and after that famous show, he was a character actor in TV and film as well. So his career as an actor included more than just playing Ward Cleaver on that show. But more than this, more than his fame and fortune, Hugh Beaumont was a father himself, as well as an interesting, intriguing, and even complex person. For example, you probably don't know this, but Hugh Beaumont, because of his devotion to his religious faith, was a pacifist. And during World War II, while other actors were going off to battle or to be a part of propaganda films, Hugh Beaumont did not. Because of his faith as a Methodist, he was a conscientious objector during World War II. And as we've mentioned, Hugh Beaumont attended theological school and finished with a master's in theology and was ordained as a Methodist preacher in 1946. And thinking of that, according to Jerry Mathers, who played the lead role of the Beaver in the famous show, Beaumont was a minister serving a poor congregation in Los Angeles, working with inner city youth mostly. And this work, as you can understand, didn't pay very much and not enough for him to make a living and support his family. So, according to Mather, he took up acting as a sideline to help support his family. And thinking about the juxtaposition of an actor being a minister, here's a quote that is rather noteworthy, and it comes from Beaumont himself. He said, "Sometimes my work as an actor presents a conflict with my ideals as a clergyman. I don't believe in the old saying that the end justifies the means, and no money that I can earn as an actor can accomplish so much good that I would feel justified in violating my ideals to earn it. If the question ever arises in a serious way, of course, I would have to give up acting." While Leave It to Beaver eventually made him famous, he grew to have very mixed feelings about the role. First of all, it typecast him for the rest of his career, but it also forced him in his family life to commute from Minnesota to California during the early years of his two children's life, and here's why. The story goes that in the mid-1950s, Beaumont was barely getting by working as a B-movie actor, a character actor, and so he was about to call it quits on Hollywood, and he actually moved to Minnesota with his family to create a more wholesome life for that family. And while beginning to settle down there in Minnesota, wouldn't you know it, he was offered his big shot, the role of Ward Cleaver on Leave It to Beaver, and he could not pass it up. So for a time, he lived in two places. He worked in Hollywood during the weekday and sometimes flew home to Minnesota on the weekend. And this dual residency lifestyle meant sometimes that his family would join him, taking the long journey west to come visit. And on one such occasion, on one trip west with Hugh's son driving his wife and mother-in-law, Hugh's son was young at this time, tragically there was an accident and mother-in-law was killed. Of course, Beaumont's dual residency necessitating the drive west lurked in the background, and while it isn't certain if the tragedy contributed to the Beaumont subsequent marital strife, Hugh and his wife eventually divorced. So after leaving Leave It to Beaver, after the show ended, his acting career completely stalled, and now he was divorced, And so he then left Hollywood completely behind, moving full-time to Minnesota for good. And he would begin a second career as a Christmas tree farmer. Yes, a Christmas tree farmer. And I can actually imagine Hugh Beaumont living the quiet life there in the woods of Minnesota, planting trees and selling them at Christmas time with a quiet contentment, and seeing the joy in people's faces, the joy of the Christmas season, and getting a lot out of that as a religious man. Sadly, just a few years into that new career as a Christmas tree farmer, he suffered a stroke, and he was 62 at this time, and this ended his burgeoning career as a tree farmer. And much more sadly, 10 years later, while visiting his son, a psychology professor in Munich, Germany, Hugh Beaumont died of a heart attack. So he died in Germany. And his ashes were scattered on the then family-owned island on Lake Wabana, Minnesota, near Grand Rapids. Thankfully, humanity, with its elements, humaneness, humility, humanness, they provide us with a more accessible and nuanced way compared to the Leave It to Beaver perfection. And that is the way of living amid the messiness of real life as best as we can, getting better and less bitter along that way. And in Mr. Beaumont, the actor's humanity, his successes and failures, his strengths and vulnerabilities, there are fruits to be secured as well. And so